Good evening, good evening, good evening. Welcome once again to another episode of Territories Talk, the last one for November. With me tonight are my co-hosts from the Virgin Islands, sorry, Frenchman's Key, uh, Miss Shaina Smith Archer, and from the Cayman Islands, West Bay, or the West Bay, Mr. Eden Hurlston. Tonight's show, we will be discussing um, immigration and labor. So we want to thank our broadcast partners. That's YouTube, Facebook, CBN Radio in the Virgin Islands, and Channel 82 in Bermuda. So again, tonight we'll be discussing immigration and labor in the overseas territories. But before we get to that topic, we'll be doing a quick roundup, and then I'll turn it over to my fellow hosts from Bestway, Mr. Eden Hurlston.
Thank you, Chris. I am so honored to be here as always and really looking forward to this discussion this evening about labor and immigration policies. The news, can I share a screen quickly here, Shaina?
Go right ahead.
All right, and so we're looking at a news report here from Barbados today, and they're talking about...
Hold on a second, Eden. I'm not seeing your screen yet.
Oh, wait, here we go.
All right. Oh, there you go.
Sharing now?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, and this is from the 13th of November, just at the tail end of COP26. And of course, people are well aware of the amazing speech that Prime Minister Mia Mottley made at COP26 on behalf of small island nations. This article and a couple other things that I'll be sticking into the comments section on Facebook really highlight the need for all small island developing nations to really gain an awareness of what went on at COP26 and what is happening in regards to the climate emergency in the world. They're talking about here how Mia Mottley had talked about the 2-degree difference being a death sentence for many small island nations. And it looks like we are going to be facing that even if all the major players in this meet up to all of their promises. That is going to bring about a meter of sea level rise, quite possibly in the next 20 years. So this is not just an environmental issue. This is going to affect immigration. This is going to affect migration. This is going to affect our jobs. This is going to affect, if you live in lowlands, highlands, it's going to affect graveyards. It's going to affect social services, the ability to drive, all within our lifetime, happening in real time. So the big takeaway from this is as Caribbean people, as small island people, get aware of what is happening with the climate emergency. Take a look at the articles that'll be posted up here and the discussions that'll be happening around the Caribbean. Oh, how do I end the screen share now? Stop sharing. There we go. And stop. We need to really stop thinking of the climate emergency as an environmental issue. It is a justice issue. It's an equality issue. It's a societal issue. It's going to be causing psychological pressures, and we need to get innovative with ways in which we deal with this and coming up with strategies for it. So again, I'll be putting those resources into the comment section, but I'm really want to give a big thanks to Prime Minister Mia Mottley and the speech that she gave there and the representation that was there for small island nations and for people in the tropics and in the global south, because that was really what drew a lot of the attention to the urgency of the situation and what is happening in the climate emergency. So that was an update coming from another Caribbean island in Barbados there in regards to what just happened in COP26.
Yeah, that was a very, very important meeting. I saw some other speeches actually from other Caribbean country prime ministers. They're on the CARICOM um, YouTube page,
Mm-hmm.
YouTube channel. People can check out to see. Again, making the same clarion call. We need 1.5 to stay alive.
Yes. And it sadly looks like it's just not going to happen. In the best case scenarios right now,
Mm-hmm.
we're looking at, people who are most optimistic are saying 1.8 by 2050. Realistic scenarios are showing 2.2 degrees. That's a dramatic shift.
Yeah.
And so this is really, we're talking about affecting how we plan our towns, how we plan coastal development that we're doing now. The decisions we're making now need to take into account what's going to be happening in 20 years. So
Yeah.
there is a definite urgency. Maldives has stated that that we have 8 years to half the world carbon emissions, or we will lose the Maldives.
Mm-hmm.
It'll be uninhabitable.
And it's I don't know. I hope she said, or all the speeches I would say, because a lot of the small island state developing countries, I think is what they refer to them as now, that they lit the fire, and that it moves from being lip service to actual actions. Because again, we can agree to a lot of things, which they did in Paris, but then if people don't go home and follow through, we're still in a crisis. So that's really crucial. Okay.
Most definitely. One thing we need to keep our eye on is this $100 billion pledge by developed nations to the global south and to developing nations to help developing nations be able to develop with climate action in mind, so that we don't end up with all the cast off fossil fuels and all this type of thing, but that we're along for the ride. So, but we're gonna send it over to you, Shaina. You said you had an exciting story to talk about for us tonight.
Well, I guess this is another one that was of international importance, but it was very specific to the overseas territories. So, my news story is about what's called the UK Overseas Territories Joint Ministerial Council 2021. So, for those who may not be aware, every year the Minister of the Overseas Territories in the UK and some other officials, they basically meet with all of the leaders and a delegation from the overseas territories in I think it's just the Caribbean. No, actually it's across all the British OTs. Sorry. So I think it's all 14 of them, 14, 15 of them. So what I found online on the UK government's website is something that I want to turn everybody's attention to go and read it. This is the policy paper that came out of the council this year. So this was just about last week, I think it is, based on the date. And again, us as citizens, whether or not, leadership comes back and they share what took place, what was discussed, what was agreed to, it's important for us to be aware and paying attention of what's being spoken about on our behalf, as I like to say. So it's really detailed. Well, I don't want to say it's detailed. They basically categorized it. So they talked about climate change, International Maritime Organization 3 code. So we have some international regulations that are going to be affecting us here on the ground. I know for us locally, there's been a lot of conversation actually around this over the last 6 months or so in this year, in terms of coming up to code and making sure that we are doing what's needed. One thing to point out though, Eden, and then I'll wrap it up, because I'll share the link also for person that's going to, yes, or guests are going to join the talk. We just have a new segment in the beginning called What's News. Somebody was just asking the question, so they're going to pop up. But yeah, so on the economic resilience, they talked about in number 4, the UK government and overseas territories will continue to cooperate on meeting evolving international regulatory and tax standards to support compliant financial services. So I find it interesting that there was no direct mention about the beneficial ownership registry. That was a very hot topic from 2019, I think it was, with the passage of the UK legislation concerning that. So I don't know if more details may come out later in regards to the position on that and what's supposed to actually happen there, because we know that the position of the OTs has been that it will be detrimental to our financial services industry. So it wasn't something that we were in support of, but we have agreed in principle to transparency, so we have to do something. So we'll see, where else it goes. But there were some points on the law enforcement, health, inclusivity. Um, so they spoke about, let's see, okay, UN rights, convention, rights of a child. Okay, some other things in terms of international. Okay, so I will share the link in our chat so that persons can take a look at that at their leisure and follow up on that, and make sure that, again, we're staying in tune with what's happening around us as well as inside of our borders.
Thanks. And definitely important to stay aware of what is being said and what is being acted on our behalf. And again, this is just another marks another way that in our region that we're all affected by these meetings and these different agreements that take place. Mm-hmm. Thank you for doing some breakdown of some key points that we need to look at there, because I need to raise my awareness of this situation for sure.
Mm-hmm. Just as a footnote, I attended some of those meetings, and let's just say colonialism lives, because the way that the overseas territories are viewed at is nothing short of semi disrespectful. I guess we have to have a show on that the whole thing another time, but I would just say what you read from the UK government is a sanitized version of what really took place. So,
I imagine.
All right.
I'm sure, and that's going to define a lot of the hoops that we jump through here as we make our way. But undoubtedly, we have to make our way, and I think that again, a lot of that comes around informing and uniting.
Exactly. Because going into a meeting like this, I don't know, it might have been beneficial, especially for the British OTs. So you kind of have like a pre-meeting, especially on those common topics that everybody is being affected by, to go in and making sure that we're holding one head, as it were. So that's also a key thing in terms of how everything transpires. So Chris will enlighten us when we do that show in terms of how beneficial and productive these meetings have been, because they only started probably within the last 10 years, Chris. They started the ministerial council. You're on mute.
Sorry. No, they started. It was prior to that. I'll get you the exact date, because it was actually called something else prior. But
okay.
But I will get a complete history, and we'll have a whole show on that.
Yeah, I think that would be a good informational topic to bring everybody up to speed on that, in terms of what happens every year with the little gathering that takes place.
I think the conglomerates made the difference at COP26, the unified way in which a lot of the different groups showed up there to make statements and all had a platform together. I think that really helped voices that would have otherwise been lost to, and some fantastic champions as well. Fearless, courageous champions, which is another part of it. Don't be afraid. We cannot be afraid to be our own people in our own home.
Yeah, and that's key. All right, Chris, what's news?
Nothing at this point. I think we should just probably go to
Bring our
the
guest on? Sure.
yeah.
All righty.
Chris is his own news. He has the traveling newsman, Mr. Michael Miles, and the Honorable Minister Jason Hayward. Welcome,
Yes,
welcome.
Nice
and
to be here, guys.
as I said earlier, we are going to be discussing immigration and labor. And in order of protocol, I proudly introduce Minister Jason Hayward, the Minister for Immigration and Labor in Bermuda, and Mr. Michael Miles, who has tirelessly worked to improve the labor force in Cayman Islands. Is not yet an MP, but I'm sure one day he will be. So,
Welcome.
Not my aspiration.
as we know, as we know, in all of our islands, immigration, work permits, labor is a very pivotal issue that over the last few years, many quote unquote belongers have started taking umbrage with the increase in work permits, the lack of locals getting jobs, so on and so forth. There's a myriad of challenges.
Mhm.
As overseas territories, we can act in isolation and not know what's going on in other countries, or we can have shows like this that would help us to educate what is working in one country, what's not working in another, and what can we do to better inform ourselves and educate our population. So tonight we have Minister Hayward and we have Mr. Michael Miles, and apologies for so far for Dr. Kendrick Pickering, who is attending to a patient because we know patients must come first. So I will start off with one question, and I'll throw this out to both. I'll start off with Minister Hayward. What is Minister Hayward? What is the most challenging issue with immigration and labor in Bermuda, and what's working and what's not working?
Well, first, let me start off by saying good evening to the Territories team and your listening audience. Certainly, when we look at immigration, we'll have to look at what I consider to be striking an appropriate balance, a balance between ensuring that we facilitate the transition of um, bodies onto jurisdictions while also protecting the rights of um, our residents. And so, as it pertains to a challenge, is ensuring that we have that appropriate balance, that the policies we put in place are actually measured, but that we ensure that we try to get the companies that are on island the talent that they require based off of the demand of skill sets they need, but also ensuring that we do not displace um, our locals out of the workforce and from opportunities, whether it be um, land, business development, or workplace opportunities. And so that's always something that we have to keep in mind. The size of our territories certainly present a unique challenge, and also the history around our labor laws and our immigration laws present a unique challenge amongst themselves. And so trying to strike and find the appropriate balance is probably one of the most challenging things that we have to grapple with. The pandemic has added a new level of complexity um, as we see contractions in our job levels across the board, and also the inability of individuals to freely move as much as they were able to transit and travel in the past. And so that is presenting also a unique challenge in terms of companies getting the required skill sets landed on island that they require. And
Sorry, uh, sorry, Mr. Miles, over to you. What in Cayman Islands? What's the most challenging issues with immigration and labor at present?
Based on my experience, and certainly the work that I've been doing with my nonprofits, the training center, working within the education system, I would say the challenges that we face right now is upskilling our people to take the jobs that our infrastructure and our industries are creating on a regular basis. And these are very well paying jobs. I think the challenges that we struggle from is that we are assuming that our people don't want those jobs because they are within the construction industry or within the automotive industry or simply within the tourism industry and they are low paying jobs and they're not. A major challenge that we have is that we are not educating our people where the careers are. We're only talking jobs, whereas the rest of the world are talking careers. The rest of the world are preparing their people to assume careers, whereas we are still talking about, okay, well, go get that job. Can I help you with a job? So what we've done is that we have turned towards this foreign labor pool because it's making the country a substantial amount of money and we're balancing our budget based on work permits, not understanding that it is creating a major shift in our country that when a lot of our foreign labor come in, they have really no plans to leave. And I think it's an unfair advantage that we are creating for our own people. Hence, one of the biggest, another major challenge that it's causing is the ripple effect, where young people, able-bodied, can actually get into the workforce and get a job. They're now deemed um, uh, to not have the necessary either skills or the necessary experience in order to enter the labor market. Whereas 30 years ago, when I graduated high school, I could enter the labor market at 16 and a half years old and get the relevant experience in order for me to climb the ladder of success. Our youngsters cannot do that. They're actually being shut out of the labor market and they're being told that they don't have the relevant experience. Well, how do you get experience if you can't get employment to get experience? So what we're finding is that more and more of our people are ending up on welfare or welfare benefits, and it's happening younger and younger. So the ripple effect that we've caused from not preparing our people from an education standpoint, and that, like, we can have an entire discussion on about this because education is such a vital part of what our labor and immigration issues are today. We don't teach the relevant skills within our education system. So therefore, our kids are also placed at a disadvantage. How can our kids at 16, 17, 18 years old come out of high school, not have no experience, compete against people that are coming in from the Philippines or from Jamaica or from or from Africa, Europe, China, and around the world? We are not preparing our kids to immediately and compete. Whereas in my research, the work that I've done, and the people that I've met around the world, they are preparing their children from middle school. From middle school, they are ensuring that their children are very much prepared and are career driven, that by the time they get to the Cayman Islands, we are going to pay them a substantial amount of money because they have been preparing from middle school throughout high school. They're part of different job opportunities from the high school systems. And I think it's a major disadvantage that we're having. Another issue with immigration is that a person could come here for just a simple work permit and end up becoming transitioning into a citizen. Well, it causes that ripple effect that when they come and they become citizens, they're bringing their families in. Their families are competing against locals. Their children are competing against our children. Their grandchildren are competing against our grandchildren. And because of the level of academic and education standards that these people have, our our children can't compete. So we have a number of very challenging situations happening within the country. And the more the unfortunately, the more that we don't resolve these, what's happening now is that our welfare system is growing. So the monies that we're making, and I've had multiple discussions with a number of people around this country, we believe that we are making all this money through our government system and taking in taxes and so forth. But the money is actually going towards things that we shouldn't really be funding at such high levels. Like the monies that we're sending to things like our prison system, because we're incarcerating more and more of our young people, or our welfare system should actually be going towards training our people from a very early age or reskilling our people. During the pandemic, I just listened to the Honorable Hayward talk about what has happened with Bermuda during the pandemic. Well, during the pandemic, we spent 20 months just being idle. We should have been retraining everybody that wanted to be retrained or upskilled in some other craft or other employment opportunity. That it did not matter when if tourism had died, those people would have been able to transition to another industry and kept on going. We've 20 something months of just paying people a stipend, and I'm not saying don't take care of our people. I think it's a great idea, but that should have come with something that tied people to doing upskilling or retraining. So when the industries rebound, our folks would have been able to get paid at a higher level. So those are the things, Chris, that I see that's going on in Ireland.
Thank you. And Minister Hayward could attest to this. And there's folks listening in from Bermuda. Um, if your accent was slightly different, anybody would think you're talking about some of the issues that we've had to deal with in Bermuda. Not so much the last 20 months per se, but the whole issue of our people are looking for jobs, whilst others are coming to our island looking for careers or being in a position to have a career. And one of the things I'm so glad about this show is that we've been fed so many myths about the success of Cayman Islands, and no one ever talks about the other stark realities. So I just want to thank you for that frankness. And now I'll hand it over to our co-host, the only lady for today, Miss Shaina Smith Archer.
Yeah, I'm representing. I'm representing today. So next question, and just to it coincidentally, actually today we actually launched. There was a program that the government launched with I think it's the education sector, labor, as well as the Chamber of Commerce today, talking about the need for that connectivity. So, Mr. Wells, you're hitting the hammer, hitting the nail on the head very forcefully on the importance of that, because that's something where we've been, speaking about for a few years now, the importance of education in driving workforce development, because there's no other way to become competitive.
I agree with you.
There it
Absolutely
is.
agree with you.
So, well, here's another question in terms of as we're unpacking this, because I think you guys may have touched on this slightly, but we know that we aren't in a position to generate all the numbers that will be required in the workforce. So, how do we balance the need for imported labor in certain industry and still making sure that there is, those career paths? And we're saying, no, it's not just about job opportunities. But even for me, it's I work with the Chamber of Commerce and I talk all the time. It's about business opportunities,
Yeah.
because businesses are the ones that create jobs. So we can't just be looking about producing employees, but making sure that some persons actually become the employers within the workforce for it to be sustainable. So the question to both of you then next is, how do we balance that? Because we know we don't have, infinite population size. But whether it's policy or programs, what are your thoughts on that?
I think we need to prioritize our people first rather than the whole immigration flow. What I see us doing quite often is that we are prioritizing everyone else before our people because immigration, I mean, let's face it, immigration pays, right? Work permits is a streamline of funds. It helps us build roads and all of the same. But what we don't understand is that we're also struggling with the ills of immigration as well, because the ills have now entered our country where people are getting paid less because our foreign labor are okay with being paid less. They're okay sometimes with being paid slave wages. So it has driven wages back down to a very unhealthy point where, a person from the Philippines or from Jamaica or so forth will work their behinds off for $6 an hour because in their country, that's a lot of money. In our country, it's not. A Caymanian can't survive on that. So we have to start to prioritize our people and ensuring that our people are put in career paths that lead to them moving up the ladder. We also talk, Sheena, we talk a lot about this lifelong learning. I don't in Cayman, I don't see that. We don't live it. We talk about it, but we don't live lifelong learning because once a youngster finishes high school, there's no other training for them to do. They may go to UCCI, but it's not appropriate for everybody to transition to the university college. It has a turnover of young people because a lot of these children or young people were not good students. What they need is we need to create a vacuum of training programs where these youngsters can go into. Then we can start to hold organizations accountable for hiring. In a small jurisdiction like ours, I have said it from the rooftops of this country. We should be able to predict our labor market from our school system. We should be able to do that because we're small enough to do that. We should be able to say, all right, in the next 3 years, we have 10 electricians coming out of our high school. We have 15 painters. We have several contractors. We have several folks that want to get into law. Like we should be able to do that because we're small enough to do that. But there's no real pathway. Like we haven't, like we've talked about all of these pathways of academic and education and training and success, but it hasn't been rolled out in 40 years in this country. And almost every time somebody gets in, I'm at most of the tables saying, why don't we stop talking about it and let's just roll it out? We have to stop saying to our children that being a construction worker is beneath them because these are the top paying jobs in our country today. We have a real estate boom, yet the majority of our people aren't in real estate. The majority of real estate agents aren't Caymanians. Why? Well, we don't teach it in school,
Mm-hmm.
right? So these are all of the things that I believe that if we not just strike this balance, but make Caymanians priority. That's what I would like to see more. And priority not meaning that when they're unemployed at 30 years old, make them priority at 10 and 11 by educating them about what our country has to offer. We don't like we're not doing that. And as I travel around the US, Jamaica, the UK, that's
Mm-hmm.
the sort of language that I hear. Those jurisdictions talking about. They're not just talking about jobs. They're talking about sustainable development. And we're not
Yeah.
doing that. We're developing just for today. But the development that we are putting in place aren't for Caymanians. And it has to be a priority where Caymanians fit into the development.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I echo what Chris said earlier. You sound like you're talking about the Virgin Islands.
Yeah.
So we are
Minister,
all
what are your
experiencing.
thoughts? I know it's a consistent thing. I have a theory as to how it came about and how we need to break the cycle, but I'm gonna bring that up later. Minister Hayward, what's your thoughts?
So there is a level of consistency in what is being experienced across all territories. But where Michael left off is when we start to talk about economic development and the factors that contribute to economic development. And one key factor being the education continuum. And so when we looked at our workforce development plan, we set out to ensure that you have to address the issue at a very young age. You can't wait to individuals who are outside of the school system to try to put them on career paths. So it's about having adequate career guidance within our schools. It's about having persons start um, education for careers at the middle and high school level. And that's part of what we're aiming to do in terms of revising our school system and introducing signature schools so that young people get on appropriate career paths and begin the training continuum early in their education. The other thing that we must take into consideration is the appropriate career guidance, whether or not the guidance counselors have the skill sets to appropriately uh, direct our kids to get involved in certain industries. What Michael touched on is the stigma that is attached to certain occupational categories. And certainly a paradigm shift needs to take place because what then it translates into is laws of opportunity. Then that goes into the role of a community college within society and how the community college is actually supposed to respond to what is the actual demand in the labor market and provide programs that connect persons with those occupational categories. And then when we get to a higher age, when we fail to do all those other things, we have to talk about adequate social protections because we fail to assist persons with secure and appropriate employment. And then we talk about workforce development for the adult population who are transitioning from job to job or find themselves in the unemployed particular area. And so what we've launched in Bermuda is a national workforce, a national reemployment strategy that actually aims to provide short-term training and development to try to get persons into a number of occupational categories. But then it becomes a little bit difficult because you're not just teaching about the occupational category, you have to now talk about employability skills. I can train you to get you into the job, but then maintaining employment, there are a number of other skill sets that you need as well. And so it is about putting the local population first and ensuring that we are not just raising a generation of employees, but we're also pushing persons into becoming employers and entrepreneurs. But then there are ceilings in certain industrial industries. And so we see where locals are able to progress up to a certain level. And then when you get to a certain management level, the invisible ceiling kicks in and we're unable to penetrate. And that brings a level of frustration within the country when you can directly see through our statistics the wage disparity um, between Bermudians and non-Bermudians, and also amongst different demographic groups.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot. Just real quick for the benefit of our radio audience, if you have just tuned in, because we know you guys don't see the video, you are tuned into Territories Talk. And tonight we are talking about labor and immigration. And we have some excellent experts, I would say, on the matter with us. Honorable Jason Hayward from Bermuda and Mr. Michael Miles from Cayman Islands. And I'm here with my brothers, Eden and Chris, as our hosts. So, Eden, over to you.
Thank you so much, Shaina. And thanks again for everyone who's tuning in and all the viewers on Facebook and YouTube. Just want to remind people, if you do have a question or something to bring up, feel free to put it in the comments and we'll try to get to it. Very interesting what you're closing off there with Minister Hayward. and when you talk about the glass ceilings, the frustrations that come about because of these different things that are happening on a lot of levels here. I mean, talking about this and talking about these transitions between schooling, the labor force, conscious development of how we're gonna form our labor force, making sure that we're hitting the markets and what is actually happening in our community. We quickly see that this gets into a lot of aspects of social development. I mean, right down to right now in Cayman, traffic is a major issue, right? And literally to the point of where this is causing people to be late for work. We don't have a functioning public transport system. So even that ability to hold your job just because the ability to actually get around, and that goes into road planning and traffic planning and how you deal with that. We're really having to take into account a lot of things regarding people's lifestyles here. Getting back to some of those frustrations and leading into our next question, we see some of these frustrations, whether it be the glass ceiling that gets hit when you reach a certain level in a job, whether you see certain frustrations like we see here about people not getting sick and realizing that their employer isn't covering them for their insurance as they've been supposed to be, but they've been deducting it from their pay. Whether you see other people advancing, people who are new to the country advancing into things that you are getting bypassed for, or we see a lot of social tensions arising and causing division in our community. How do we deal with those? How do we deal with the arising frustrations and the social tension that results from it? Minister Hayward, let's go back to you to start off on this discussion.
Well, certainly the population are not going to be satisfied until they see progress, until they see things changing, until they see a level of results. Certainly, as a government in Bermuda, we've certainly been cognizant of the challenges that the local workforce face, and we've tried to put measures in place that reduce some of the barriers that currently exist as much as we possibly can. But a lot of the things that we ought to be implementing or could be implementing are hindered with our fiscal position. And so the healthcare crisis has translated into an economic crisis and is impacted government's fiscal ability to respond in an adequate way that we would like. So we have to look at it from a holistic point of view and look at economic development and economic growth so that we have the appropriate revenues that come in so that we can utilize those revenues to expand social program offerings, educational offerings, workforce development offerings.
Thank you very much. And Michael, you were talking about frustrations as well. We are having NAU. About 10,000 people, or about almost a third of the population of the Caymanian population here is getting some form of social assistance. And according to some last numbers, over 2,500 families. We're seeing it become generational, to where it's actually a way of life for some families to expect that check, and that has to amount in a lot of frustrations and feelings of not being able to move up. How do we try to stop that from tearing us apart and deal with these social tensions?
We need to de-silo a number of different entities within government. Immigration and the Ministry of Education, very little conversation linkage. I believe that immigration and the Ministry of Education, the Department of Education Services, have to have more dialogue, and certainly their policies have to interface. Minister Hayward said earlier on, what I believe that has to happen, that immigration and the Ministry of Education should be sharing data we have a number of young people overseas. We have a number of young people in local universities are doing training, but immigration doesn't know that. The Ministry of Education are providing scholarships for these youngsters, but immigration doesn't know that. So these youngsters go through 4 years of college or 4 years of training or whatever they're doing, and all of a sudden they come back to the island and there's no jobs. So they sit, many of them either working in industries or working in put in jobs that are beneath really where they were expecting to be at, because no information, no preparation was shared. I mean, I'm happy to see Minister Hayward and his organization at least have a plan in place that is now guiding young people to different opportunities. Well, we need that here in Cayman. We have to start to have a steady transition that when if Michael Miles is has gotten a funding from the government to go overseas to study whatever, my name should automatically be shared with the immigration department or work as it's now called, and work should be in contact with me to have a clearer understanding of what I am doing overseas in terms of study, because work should be setting me up with numerous amounts of employees in Cayman that when I come back, either during the summer or Christmases, I am moving into some sort of an apprenticeship or at least some sort of employment. And then 2 years before I'm about to graduate, what should happen is that I should be saying to work, okay, I three or four organizations that that I've worked with. I want to work with X organization. Work should be contacting that organization to say Michael Miles is coming back in 2 years. You need to be ready for him. So it can't be that you have an employee that you don't want to actually get rid, move on. Michael is coming back, and Michael will be qualified to work in your organization because we are no longer granting work permits for this particular job. That doesn't connect, and because it doesn't connect, you find a lot of young people just in total disarray because we've told them, we've lied to them and said, go off, get your education, or go to college, get further education, get qualified. And then these kids are saying, well, I still can't get a job, so what's the use? Because there's no connection. Our needs assessment department that deals with welfare and so forth, the laws have to be changed that puts more teeth in it. And we've been discussing this, I don't know, for 30 something years, 40 years. We have a poor relief policy or a poor relief law. When you look at a poor relief law, it doesn't say anything about helping people get off of welfare. So people sit in welfare and they get frustrated. Their children, grandchildren see this, and welfare pays. You could sit on welfare for 20 years, and the needs assessment unit doesn't have one program that they can take a person off of welfare and work them through the program. Then there's a disconnect between NAU, which is our welfare office, and our employment office. When really they should be talking to each other to make a seamless transaction. If I'm a client of NAU should be transitioning me right over to work and then working my case together. Whereas I'm just expected to just walk to the next department. No one really knows that I'm coming. I sit for 2 hours, and at the end of the day, I get frustrated and I walk out. And this is what's happening with a lot of our people that are unskilled. It's not that they don't want to work; they're fed up, they're frustrated. So when I talk about we have to tear some of the silos down, we have to tear some of the silos down because here's what we're doing, folks. We are creating agencies on the backs of our people. We are paying people, we are paying civil servants in departments to manage herds of people. That's it. The people aren't really benefiting from these departments. They're given a check, yes, but their lives are in total disarray. So what happens when they see a person that comes off the plane, get a really nice job, live in a really nice part of town, get a really nice car, and they're living a Cayman dream? Of course, it's going to cause tension. We've also segregated our school systems. When I was going to school 30 years ago, anybody could have gone to the Cayman Islands High School. Today, you know, You're talking about organizations like CIS, it's 90% foreign. And I'm not saying that Cayman should be held priority in our public schools, but I believe that we should have several positions within our schools to integrate expats within them. Because what's happening is that when our children do not understand their entire world, how do we expect them to assimilate when they become adults and working in the adult world with the same young people that they really should have gone to school with? So that's causing some issues. And I think that on both aspects, whether it's in the public school or in the private schools, our government or the school system should be at least providing scholarships to Caymanians to assimilate the private schools. So Caymanians are alumni are in those systems, and vice versa. We should look at expatriate children coming back into our public schools, because I think that if we can do that, it's going to be easier to assimilate these young people when they transition into the workforce. So, it is we now have to function this on a several pronged system, you know, de-siloing government departments so they're talking to each other and they're helping people more. And we have to look at our education system where we're now moving children a little bit together to have them understand their countries, where they're coming from. I knew when I went to the Cayman High School 30 years ago, I was going to class with kids from all over the world. They knew that I was Caymanian, and we were able to assimilate to each other's, culture very, very easily. I understood where they were coming from. I played football with them. We played cricket with them. We did volleyball. We went to class with them. We had swimming lessons with them, and we became good friends. Some of my good friends were from other countries. Today, that doesn't really happen unless a kid gets a job and graduates, get a job in an organization, and then all of a sudden it's this culture shock that we have 140 different nationalities in Cayman, right? And then what he sees and she sees, because I hear it more and more, is that all of these foreigners in our countries taking our jobs. That's been the recurring theme, and we need to end that as quickly as possible. But it has to be through education, and it has to be through government entities and private sector entities coming together to move some of the
All right. Thank you,
That is
Michael.
fantastic, man. And we're seeing a lot of recurring themes here about breaking down silos, reducing barriers, like Minister Hayward was touching on. Again, integration and cohesion, and that, I mean, basically we start building that cohesive society from within school from a younger age to where there's greater understanding. And of course, if the people of a nation are more empowered, then there's going to be less fear and less division in the society as a whole. So I mean, like, obviously, education is a cornerstone of this entire issue. As we go through discussing this, it becomes apparent.
It is.
Yeah, we
It
can end the
is.
show right there.
It is.
Wow. Somebody was just here texting me. It was like, Shayna, how is it that the OT seems to have been rubber stamped with the same issues and concerns in terms of the paradigms that have set themselves up, and that
Mm.
we're all being challenged maybe at different degrees, but it's the same thing.
Slightly different styles, but the same issues,
Yeah.
most definitely.
Yes,
What
definitely.
what one of the recurring trends what I've seen in visiting well living in Bermuda but visiting the BVI and Cayman Islands is that I was in Cayman Islands and someone said to me, listen, most of our tradesmen now are coming from um, Jamaica, the Heart Foundation or Philippines or somewhere like that. I go
Hmm.
to BVI and it's somewhat similar. And I
Hmm.
know for sure in Bermuda we have a challenge with our young people wanting to get into the trades. I went to life before COVID, 2019. I went to two high school graduations both public high schools, and it was a total of 250 students graduating. And at each high school, they list what the student is planning to do after graduation. And I counted out of 250 students, only 15 talked about getting into anything to do with the trades. So if even if you use an attrition rate that maybe five of them don't actually follow through, we're looking at maybe 10 out of 250 persons getting into the trades. That's less than 5%. That's like we're just setting ourselves up to always have a long amount of guest workers coming into Bermuda to do
Mm-hmm.
these trades. So, well, my question to starting with Minister Hayward is, how do we encourage our young people, male and female, to get into the trades?
Well, I mentioned that we need to begin with integrating that sort of education into our um, education system at an earlier age and putting individuals on this particular career pathways. And that's what you're seeing with the introduction of signature schools, which will speak to individuals getting on that career path earlier and then transitioning through the community college who have trade programs to end up in industry. But is a second problem that we haven't touched on, and that is um, making sure that we appropriately educate parents um, who dissuade the children from entering into trade occupations. And so there's a paradigm shift that needs to take place at that level. There's a paradigm shift that needs to take place at the community career guidance level so that they are also speaking positively about that occupational category. There's a generation of people that would have worked in trades that they don't they don't have that same desire for their children to work in those particular occupational categories. And so I believe it's about education, but also having persons understand the remuneration attached to those particular occupational categories. And once they find out that there is a variety of jobs that are well paid, I think that will be less inclined to see the current resistance that we currently do.
Thank you. Because sure, even in England, I've seen posters where the construction industry is trying to get more young people, especially women, into the construction industry. Um, Over to you, Mr. Miles. How do you get young Caymanians? I know I first met Mr. Michael Miles through a mutual friend, Mr. Billy, and I should say Sir Billy. And how do you get young Caymanians interested into the skills?
I agree with what Minister Hayward just said. I think it has to start as early as possible. We don't have a system in Cayman where our young people are exposed to the trades as early as possible. What we are often talking about are jobs within the trades. I don't want to be a laborer because everybody feel that, well, being in construction is about just being in the hot sun, and that's all we sell. I don't want to be in the tourism industry because I don't want to be a server or I don't want to be a housekeeper. We never go beyond that. And the conversation that I consistently hear, it's always I don't want to be a server. I don't want to be in housekeeping. When the trades have accounting, HR, management, supervision. We also consistently talk about employees. I don't talk about employees at my training center anymore. I talk about ownership. How do I own the company? How do I teach our people to go beyond an employee? We
Mm-hmm.
don't teach that in our school
Yes.
system. What we
Yep.
teach is how do you get a job, whether it's low income or not, low paying or not, and just live the rest of your life. We never said, okay, well, you can own the construction company, you can own the automotive dealership, you can own the water sports organization. We don't teach ownership. We teach participation as employees. And I think it's a lot of fear mongering of what's going on So why are we shocked when someone gets off the plane from Jamaica and now owns his own automotive dealership or own automotive garage, or some folks get off the plane from Europe and all of a sudden they own their own water sports. Why are we surprised? Why? Because their countries, how they
They,
grew up, taught them about
mhm.
ownership. They taught them about entrepreneurship. They taught them about banking. They taught them the soft skills. I've spoken with, in the last 3 years, prior to building Inspire Human Training, I met with personally with over 150 employers, because when I put the training center in place, I wanted to have a clear understanding what employers wanted. And I went into it very googly eyed of, I'm going to offer all of these construction courses. So I got an accreditation to offer over 70 construction courses. And it was like what Minister Hayward just said. They did not only want those skills, they wanted soft skills. So I've had to backtrack. And now in all of the programs that we teach at the center, we now teach employability skills, because the craft skills can be taught on the job.
Mhm.
But what employers are not teaching are things thinking, emotional intelligence, right? They don't want to teach that. They're not going to tell someone to show up on time or work hard. All of these things have to be taught. And unfortunately, what's not happening in our school system is that
Yep.
we're only teaching math, English, and science and so forth, and we think that that's enough, that's only going to set our kids up for success. Well, it's not,
Mhm.
because as Minister Hayward said, if you are a phenomenal craft professional showing up for work late every day, it doesn't matter how skilled you are, you're not going to get a job, right? And we need to start to teach this stuff. We need to have courses to teach this stuff. We need to have better guidance counseling. Our kids only seem to get work experience when they get into their final year of school, when really we should be starting to simulate our children to the world of work from the moment that they hit high school,
Yep.
right? We should be talking about this. We also have a number of career days. All of these career days, I've been to several. My organization was invited to several. Rarely you find trade organizations
Yeah.
coming to these. So
Mhm.
how are they going to know? Like, how are our kids going to know that these are possible careers for them to go in, right?
Mhm.
So here's what happens: they go into career day, and everybody goes over to banking. Well, where a lot of those kids end up being a
Yep.
teller. Well,
Yeah.
being a teller is less than being a laborer, right? It's just
Yeah.
wearing nice clothes. These kids are making a lot of money to be a teller. But what if we could train them up to own a construction company? We specialize. We have some of the best beaches in the world, but most of the ownership with water sports are expatriates. It's not Caymanians, right? So why can't we offer our young people PADI certified training from the time they're in high school? That by the time they get out of high school, the only thing that they need to do is do their dive master training and become a professional, right? We're not talking about careers, folks. We're not talking about, where the country's moving to. All I hear is that I want to get into finance and banking, but it's not connecting to the real industries of what's moving things. So I'm saying to young people, you can still get into finance. There's several construction companies that have finance departments, they have accounting departments. Well, I want to get into human resources. Great. There's several automotive dealerships that have human resources built into them. You're still in within those industries, and eventually you end up owning a number of these organizations as well. So there has to be more investment in the whole entrepreneurship part of what we do within education. We have the government have generous, I think 2 years ago, brought on a department that deals with the whole business implementation. Um, it's called the Cayman Islands Business Center. Great out, but again, we need to get that into the schools. It cannot be that when you're getting 18, 19, 20, 30 years old, that you're just now learning about this. Like, it has to be provided to young people earlier. We have to teach soft skills from the moment that from the moment that they get out of primary school and entering into high school. Because I'm telling you one thing right now, 99% of all employers that I've met, they have all said, I can train that. I cannot train soft skills. I will hire an individual who have a phenomenal attitude, but they don't have work experience. I will take them in a heartbeat, but I cannot teach someone how to put their pants in their shirt. Sorry, put their shirt in their pants. I cannot teach someone to not sag, to show up on time, to have good customer service, to have a good attitude. We're not going to teach that, but we can teach them how to be electricians. We can teach them how to be plumbers.
Mm. All right, thank you, Michael.
All of this stuff can be taught, but we cannot teach the soft skills part.
Thank you. I know Minister Hayward is sitting there saying, asking himself if you're looking at his notebook. Next question is over to you, Shaina.
All right, so I want to bring up a viewer question because I think this is a good place to interject it in terms of the conversations that we've been having so far. And Chris is almost as if they saw the questions before we even put them out because they've touched on all of them. But someone posed a question: immigration and labor challenges are most often viewed as a government problem to fix. What role would you suggest that individuals should play in being part of the solution? And I guess we could also probably put the business community in there as well, because they're a big player and a factor in this, in being part of the solution and responsible for their own success where the opportunities exist. So I open it up to everybody, including us as hosts, as well, who would like to start first.
Well, certainly when I look at the question, there are a number of answers I want to give, but I think I'll start with personal responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
It certainly is one's personal responsibility to ensure that they position themselves to take advantage of opportunities that exist, whether it be employment opportunities or business opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
But secondly, once one gets in position and becomes a business owner, it's incumbent on that individual to open up the door to create opportunities for others, especially persons within that particular community. Our young people are coming in from school and they are facing a roadblock because they don't have the experience required for them to enter into the job market. But if every entry-level job requires some level of experience, how will young people be integrated into the world of work?
Yeah.
And if opening up of your business requires a certain level of capital, and the lending institutions are not lending that particular capital, how will they succeed um, in being an entrepreneur? And so there are a number of different factors that are attached to that particular question, but I'll allow other panelists to view it from their lens.
Okay.
I think we need to have more people in the private sector become more mentors and create more apprenticeship opportunities for young people. They don't often have to go right into employing that young person, but they certainly have to create more opportunities to learning. And I think if more businesses open their doors to more young people in terms of apprenticeships or even internships, they'll find out that these kids have real skills and they can provide good training for them. And eventually they have a good employee because they would have nurtured that talent. So that's one I've been encouraging a number of the organizations that I partner with to take trainees from me because they now need more mentoring. So I think that needs to be incentivized by each organization.
Okay. Awesome. Eden, you have any thoughts on that?
I do. I definitely 100% support what Minister Hayward and Michael just talked about. one thing, and it's just speaking from an experience today, as an individual, is hire your own as much as possible, and support companies that are aggressively supporting training our young people. So today we have an air conditioning company here called Polar Bear, and they are well known for having young Caymanians working for them, moving up in their organization, getting extended training. And again, a young Caymanian guy was here today with another guy who was showing him the ropes, and excellent job. And you pay a little more, but you have to look at these things as an investment in your community, in the safety of your future, of your people being around you, of one less person who might not have to make that option of, do I sell drugs to take care of my family, or do I have a pathway here, servicing people's ACs, and a chance to expand my knowledge here. And so it is really important that you be discerning with your dollar and put it where it is supporting any organization that is trying to uplift our community. And on the flip side of that, individual responsibility is take advantage, like Mr. Minister Hayward is saying, of any educational opportunity that comes your way. Even with things like YouTube these days, there is so much information on there that you can pursue an interest, or pick at an interest that you might have, and see, hey, is there a way I can make a little $500 a month by taking my photographs? Is there a little way I can make a little $500 a month by doing my gardening that I like to do, and turning that into more than a hobby? And so don't close off your mind to yourself and your own potential. Always know that there's more territory to be explored.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, I definitely agree and support everything that's been said. And I think especially one of the key things in terms of the mentorship we've taken for granted, because, we place a lot of responsibility and think that all the training and development has to happen in the education system. But I know, from the stories that I've heard, that is how locals got into the trades, especially because it would be, if you were a boat builder, you're training, you're passing that on to your family members, whether it's your sons or your nephews or your grandsons, as well as the entire village, because that is what, you was available as the opportunity at the time. But times shifted, and I know when tourism came in, it was about, again, foreign investors bringing in jobs. That was the big thing, and everybody wanted to go work in that area. And then when financial services became the next sector to be developed, everybody wanted to put on a shirt and tie. So the stigmas around, being outdoors, being on the cars, all these things. I remember in school being told, you're looking for the nice job. That's how it was coined. And then now when it comes down to the dollar and cents, it's like you can't, you could be working in your office, but you have to go to the mechanic, you have to call a plumber, you have to call the electrician. Yeah. And some of them are making twice what you are making, So we really have to reverse that as a community, in terms of us understanding that, there's no honest work that's below you. And that's one of the things we have to stress to our young people, because, for some of them, it's becoming about easy money. And it's a negative situation now that's creating another set of problems, right? Because of the stigmas that they hear right at home. So even if the school does all these campaigns, if they go home and, somebody's telling them, no, you shouldn't become a plumber because, it's dirty work, or it's frowned upon. Not understanding that, then the dollars and cents, when it comes to your quality of life, this will give you a good quality of life, because then you can afford the cost of living and be able to do well and basically advance the next generation, because then you can educate them to do whatever they want to do and continue to develop the country. So I wholeheartedly agree with what everybody has said, and especially what you said, Eden, in terms of local businesses. I know we hear the horror stories I hear about employability, and that's something that definitely has to fix. But it's going to require some patience on all our parts to work again with persons in terms of the on the job training while we try to correct the entire system to be able to get the outcomes that we want to see. So that's very crucial. So, but
That's true.
thank you, Jackie Miles, for that question.
It brings up some cultural aspects there as well, because mentorship and apprenticeship, like you were saying with your reference to shipbuilding, that is our tradition in among overseas territories, the Caribbean, people in general. As far as being a young person, you say, "Oh, I like working with my hands. I like using rope. I like pounding nails." And then the next thing you know, by the time you're 15, you know how to sail, you know how to build a catboat, and so I think it's important on a cultural note to that we need to re-embrace that learning dynamic of mentor, and that not everyone is going to sit in a classroom and learn. Let's get kids out there at young age working side by side with experts, and re-embrace that cultural aspect of mentorship and apprenticeship.
Yeah, that's key. All right, Eden, while you're up, next question up.
My goodness, I forgot we had a list of questions.
Well, pick one, because I think they've been touching on most of them
And
already.
it's true. We've definitely picked apart quite a few of these questions that we've been going through and discussing. If I can I do the last one about the little bit of role playing as a student
Yeah.
there. Okay, I'm gonna we have again and again, it has come up on this show, regardless of whether it is a woman in leadership series, part of our series on women in leadership, regardless of when we had activists on, when we talked about the cost of living, we end up at some point talking about the brain drain that is happening in our countries. Losing talented people that are here due to cost of living, due to better opportunity elsewhere, and then also our talented young people not coming back home. We're talking about honors university students, people who are studying innovative fields in everything from psychology to food, growing food, to laboratory science, and just basically that we are not innovating at a rate to make it palatable for them to come back home and feel that they can use their talents. So if I'm a Caribbean student and I'm at an excellent university, I'm an excellent student, I have a good work ethic, and I'm studying innovative ways to contribute to society. Now, I'm not interested in being a billionaire, but I want to have a livelihood that does something positive for the world, and I want to make an impact and make a splash in this pond. What needs to happen in our region? What needs to happen in Cayman? What needs to happen in Bermuda to make me feel confident about moving back home to apply my talent and not taking an up opportunity elsewhere? How do we fix this brain drain from that perspective?
So for that individual you just described, what I've seen that works best for that individual who is innovative, maybe the industry that they want to go into is not fully developed. What I've seen work best is when we create an ecosystem around that individual, such as a business incubator, where that person can be part of a collective group of individuals who receive the appropriate support and are nurtured through their journey into their business development. And where they're in these ecosystems and they feel as though they're being valued, they feel as though they're getting the necessary support, and they can see the fruits of their labor, I've seen where there's a greater likelihood for that person to remain within our communities. Where that person comes back and all they um, see or feel is repeated resistance and barriers and a lack of support, um, that's where they make the world their oyster. And so it depends based off of what the person's interest actually is. For young people, if they're in the healthcare profession, there's almost a job guaranteed for them. If they got an accountancy designation, it's almost a job guaranteed for them in Bermuda. If they're a chef, it's almost a job guaranteed for them. And so some occupational categories, there are opportunities. For others, where there's limited opportunities, we certainly need to provide the support that allows that person to flourish.
And what are opportunities in Bermuda like for innovative tech? Like speaking of the first segment and talking about the climate emergency and this, like the solar technicians are one of the fastest growing jobs throughout the world. Cayman we don't have an integrated system yet for teaching that, though the opportunities in it are obviously vast. Is Bermuda pursuing training in things like that, solar technology, water? And different energy generation, different things like that?
So financial technology, renewables, we have a number of business development incubators. We have the Bermuda Economic Development Corporation, who have programs specifically geared to assisting young entrepreneurs. And so it can be improved, but we do have support to a certain extent, and we also have support in terms of assisting persons with getting the capital that they require to get their business off the ground.
That's definitely a good start. Thank you very much. Michael, same question to you. How do we fix this brain drain? How do we make it attractive for our young people to come back home and use their talents?
As I said, as I said earlier, the biggest issues the biggest challenge that I believe that we have right now is that no one knows that they're coming back. These kids are on government scholarships. No one really knows that they're coming back. So I think that we need there first. Immigration or work have to have them, on their radar. To even have any opportunity of understanding what these youngsters are doing, we have to have them on our radar that they are coming back, and then we have to start to move them into the industries or the particular areas that they want to specialize in. The challenges that that a lot of these kids are saying is that, and why they don't want to come back is because there's no opportunity. There's opportunity here. We are not creating that for them or allowing them to see what the opportunities are. So I believe that there have to be a clearer path, that once a kid gets, when we've just increased all of our scholarships, right? Every scholarship, all international scholarships have gone up a significant, at least by $10,000. We've now put in a specialized scholarship program where we are now giving these 2 or 3 people over $100,000 to go to an Ivy League school. Well, that's great, but if there's not a clear path of where they're going to be inserted into our sector, we are also going to lose that talent as well to some other country other than ours. So I believe that we have to have either a database that we create and ensure that, one, those kids are registered in that database, and when they're coming back throughout the summers, that they know that they're placing them within the industries. A couple of years before, I would say 2 years, because within a government, things change. I would say at least 2 years before these kids come back, we should be contacting companies and these youngsters, and we should be saying they're coming back in 2 years. We're not granting another work permit for this person. So therefore, our kids will get that choice. We have to be able to give more money to the Cayman Islands Center for Business Development. It is our incubator for business development, and we have to start to use that a little bit more to also ensure that the kids that want to come back to actually create a business is put this organization so they can get funding. Not a lot of people know about this organization, so we have to make sure that that's put out there very early. I think if we can do those things, those young people will come back into our country and they'll have a much better opportunity to even be successful here and provide us with business opportunities.
Very good point there, because that the thing is that they are going to be the next ones to innovate. They're going to be the next ones to innovate our society. If we don't give them the foothold to take the next step,
Absolutely.
and again, it leads us back to this early education. The more we can encourage and influence at an early age, a work ethic opportunity, the training and the mentorship, it seems that we're building a more empowered society here. So it looks like we're seeing some universally applicable concepts that can help us out here in the Caribbean if we execute them, if we put them into
I think that
action.
one of the things that I've seen even in the U.S. and Canada is that what they're doing, even in their construction sectors, they're incentivizing people to get into those sectors. They're paying for all of their training and paying them a bonus when they actually sign that contract. So some people are getting paid up to $5,000 or $6,000 once they get through all of that training. They're also giving them the time off in order to finish their training. So they'll, for instance, many of these people work 3 days a week with the company, and then they're training 2 days a week. But a company pays for that, and those are the incentives that I think that we could also be providing to organizations in Cayman, that they take a lot of our young people, right? Okay, if you take X amount of young people, we will discount whatever work permit, or we will provide you whatever discounts at the port whenever you bring in equipment or whatever you're bringing in. The things that I think that we can do in order to reduce barriers for our young people to move into sectors and get established.
Very good points, definitely. I'm going to kick it over to Chris for the next section. We're at the 8:05 here. Once again, thank you everyone for tuning in and discussing labor and immigration here with Mr. Michael Miles from the Cayman Islands and the Honorable Minister Jason Hayward from Bermuda. And over to you, my brother, Mr. Famous.
Okay. Let me ask this question, and maybe it may sound a little bit provocative, to say the least, right? In your position, Minister Hayward, I know we've just embarking on something, but should we have annual quotas on persons who are given belongership, or in order to manage our population size for sustainable growth?
It's a very thought-provoking question, but it all depends from the lens you're looking at. I think we've came to the economic conclusion that our population levels at this current level is not sustainable. And so we have a desire to increase our population to have a greater level of both economic growth and development. As it pertains to quotas, there are ways in which we can use immigration to control our population and expand and contract when we necessarily require it. As it pertains to quotas, whether it be belonger status, there's people that are naturalized or one that qualifies for Bermuda status. I don't support quotas at that particular level, because I believe that if persons have a legal right to Bermuda status, then they shouldn't be prohibited because the island has a quota. So there are other ways in which we can utilize immigration to control our population levels. But what we have to appreciate is in Bermuda, there are more jobs in the economy than Bermudians that are capable of working in the workforce. And as a result, there is always going to be a demand for a certain level of guest workers. You would know in Bermuda, we're doing other things to attract a greater level of residents. Rather, we allowing persons to work from Bermuda on an annual basis, where the persons make a significant um, investment into the economy, they can receive an economic investment certificate and then also reside in the um, country. But as it pertains to persons who fill certain occupational categories, and there should not be an expectation that that person remains in that occupational category indefinitely. I think when suitable and qualified Bermudians um, do come about, they should have the rights to those particular jobs. And so it's you have to be very measured in terms of when we're talking about quotas um, as it pertains to our population.
All right, thank you. And over to you, Mr. Mouse.
Um, I I
You
think
could
what
you
I
could answer you
what
could answer in two sentences.
I believe that we need to make our people priority, and I think that I agree with Minister Hayward. I think that we're always going to have foreign expertise in our country because we have more jobs than we have people. We have to start to ensure that we train up our people to at least take the jobs that the good paying jobs that we currently have here. I think if we can do that, I personally understand that when it comes to infrastructure building, there's always going to be a population increase. But I believe that we cannot leave our people behind. And I think that that's what the Cayman Islands is doing. We're building our country up, but our people are being left behind. And that has to be changed. So if we can improve that, I think development organically will take its place, but we have to make sure that Cayman Islands aren't left behind.
All right, let me interject here for a moment. Last year you had a change of government from one that was, how can I say, solely focused or primarily focused on population growth and economic expansion through building, to now you have a government that seems to be a little bit more listening to the people. Where do you see that the present immigration minister is taking some of these things into consideration?
It's too early for me to comment on that. I believe that everybody has been very focused on battling COVID,
Mhm.
and not immigration itself. I think what they have done is that they have made it clear to the business community that it's not going to be business as usual of granting work permits. What they're not doing is funding training. That's what they're not doing. They're not funding training. So if you want more people in the hospitality industry, you can't say to the hotels that you can't get your people in, but the Caymans aren't actually qualified to take those jobs. So you're either going to have to do one or two things. You're going to either have to let those people in so you can build back those companies so you can get the taxes from them, or focus on training up your Caymanians to take those jobs and lower your welfare, because that's what's happening to us. What this government is currently doing is what they've had to do in order to contain COVID. People were laid off from the tourism industry, but there were loads of other industries that we could have ensured that those people transition in. We just paid them money without the expectation that they should be getting reskilled or retooled to go into other industries. And I think that we have to now strike a balance. And that balance have to be, if you want training, we will pay for that. We will incentivize you to do that. But you're not going to sit at home and just get paid anymore. You have to get back out. We have to get you back to work. We have to get you supporting your families, because that should not be government's responsibility. So I believe going forward, if you're going to deny an organization a work permit, you must have several Caymanians in a training environment where they can take on those jobs. We don't, Chris, we don't have that yet. And unfortunately, we're going to have this lack of professional personnel within hotels and within our work sites that could be also a bit hazardous to our, I would say, to our tourism product, because they're simply not trained.
All right. Thank you for that. Now over to you, Shana.
Let me unmute myself. We have a few comments to just share. Somebody earlier talked about their experience that when they were in school, that they had more engaging teachers, who supported them in terms of being role models. And I guess sort of slash career counselors. I could share that same sentiment. That is also one of the key things in our school system for us to look at. We've also shared a lot of links for you guys to go and take a look at, when you have a few minutes and you're online. The Bermuda Economic Development Association press conference for the Virgin Islands Education Labor Connect Initiative, that was actually today. So that's something there in the comment section. There's another viewer. What about when such trainees return back to their home country to serve, there would be need for a system to which they return to allow innovation to break from the outdated routine. I think we touched on this, but I like the idea in terms of what Mr. Biles was saying, that we need to have some type of registry, because I know most times, at least with the labor department here, the persons are unemployed. That's when they go to labor, right? So as a college graduate or a college student, I think you will qualify as being unemployed, and it would be good if they're able to, let's say within a year of graduating, that they actually now pop up on that registry, that when companies and businesses go in to apply for work permits, that they are part of the pool, that the labor department would say to them, hey, this person will become available in the next 6 months, graduating, and here are their qualifications that they'll be coming out with, and whatever the case is, to allow, again, to facilitate the job placement. Because this is a conversation I have been having for the last 2 years as on the scholarship committee here in the Virgin Islands, and I see it where, again, you mentioned the silos where education isn't speaking to HR, isn't speaking to the labor department.
Right.
And we are graduating people every year from our high schools, and every year people are coming out of college. So the seamlessness of all of this has to be become more efficient, to make sure, again, that we are realizing the career paths that we have set them on, to make sure that they are successful. So I wholeheartedly endorse that. And
this is actually a chance to, like Mia Motley has talked about, of where the climate emergency is offering us a chance to understand where we need to innovate. We don't need to develop more people to go looking for oil reserves. We need to develop people who are going to understand how to put in solar panels, how to work on electrical engines that run cars. We have this opportunity here that is a terrible, crazy thing we're going to be dealing with for quite a long time. It's happening now, but it is, like she said, an opportunity for us to say, hey, this is how we can pinpoint. We're going to need X amount of engineers doing this. We're going to need X amount of people designing roads. We're going to need X amount, and we have to rethink of this stuff. So young people, your ideas are welcome. No idea is disregarded. Let's throw it out there and let's get some innovative ways to deal with this emergency. So this is another chance, if we leverage it, which we haven't done so well leveraging the opportunity that the pandemic gave us. We haven't done so well leveraging our small size, as far as like what Michael has been talking about tonight, being able to understand how many people are studying this in school, so we know we're going to have X amount of mechanics coming out of school next year. So this is a chance for us to leverage this emergency as an opportunity to help us spell out the next little part of our future here, and give young people some guidance into what they can contribute, because we all have to fight this.
Oh yeah, definitely.
It's a huge chance to innovate.
All right, so we'll start to wrap up now. I think we've given our viewers and listeners tonight a lot to think about because again, it's not just a government problem, it's not just a business problem, it's not just education system, but it's for all of us to understand we're all in the same river right now. So we really have to, you know,
We certainly are.
initiate the planning. Because for me, you know, if I had $1 for every time you guys talk about systems and the need for systems and planning, you know, I'd be very rich tonight. But that's what it boils down to. We have to be intentional with how we're developing our country through planning. And
I agree.
change all those old paradigms that, you know, they were handed down to us. But now that we're in control of the systems, it's time for us to change for what serves us best. All right.
Yeah. Yeah. Mr. Miles, I just want to tell you, my WhatsApp's been blowing up with people who are liking your comments, your passion, and you too, Minister Hayward. But I must say, Mr. Miles got a little bit more votes tonight.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
I'm
So
trying to
thank
figure out how to get him here in the Virgin Islands. Because trust me, that's the kind of championship we need over here.
send the bomber charger for him.
I'll work.
Yeah. So thank you, gentlemen. It's much appreciated, and no doubt we will be having you back in the new year because this is an ongoing conversation
Mhm.
that we must continue to educate ourselves about, and more importantly, educate our people about. So I want to thank our partners, media partners, Lemon Woods of Channel 82, and the Cox family of CBN Radio in Virgin Islands, and all the listeners on Facebook, YouTube, and who have been sending me countless messages on WhatsApp. We thank you. We thank you. We thank you.
All right. Until next time, I think our next show is the 4th.
Yes. Any final words, Eden?
Just huge thanks to Honorable Minister Jason Hayward and to Mr. Michael Miles for coming on the show. Definitely, we could have an entire show on lifelong education, on education in general, on training, on any one of the aspects we touched on tonight. And so thanks for helping unpack this and sharing this knowledge across the Caribbean here. And Michael, I knew we would be we talked about it, and we didn't let it. I knew we'd be on media together at some point, so we're gonna have some more conversations around this and keep sharing, informing, and uniting across the Caribbean. Thank you for coming, my brother.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Mr. Miles.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. Cool.
All right. Take care, guys.
All
All
right.
right. Thanks to all our viewers. We'll see you next time.